I pulled into my driveway, and everything felt wrong: a minivan in my spot, a lawn chair on my porch, and a stranger laughing in my living room like he paid the mortgage. I said 3 words out loud when I saw it. That's my house. It's strange how something that smells like your old coffee mug can look like somebody else's idea of comfort. My name's Ethan Cole. I'd been away 9 months, and home was supposed to be a quiet landing. Instead, I found a notice slipped under the door, a cheerful letter about a community rental program, and a woman at the HOA office who wore confidence like armor. Her name was Margot Hale, perfect hair, perfect patience, and a ledger for a conscience. She told me, very politely, that the community had voted. That was the first lie. The second was her smile when I asked to see the vote. The signatures in her folder looked practiced, like someone tracing the same motion until it felt right on paper. I've learned to spot patterns in handwriting, in people, and her pattern felt engineered. She called it progress. She called me misinformed. Once she called me boy, and the word landed heavier than any paper. I could have made a scene: glare, shout, hold the deed in the air like a flag, but I'm not loud for show. I called Tommy, Reyes, and June instead, the kind of friends who think in steps and hold their temper until it turns useful. They showed up fast, quiet as the kind of storm that means business. We walked the property the way investigators do when they respect a place. Careful, slow, noticing the small things other people skip. Reyes pointed to footprints by the side gate that didn't match the usual delivery drivers. June found a thin notebook in a closet with shorthand notes, dates, initials, dollar amounts, the ledger's shadow. When we spoke to the renters, they were deflated, embarrassed, and honest. They'd come with cash, a stack of IDs, and an explanation that sounded too hopeful. We were told everything was cleared, the man said, voice folding at the end. You meet people like that, and your anger shifts, it cools into focus. Margot didn't come alone. She arrived flanked by 2 men who looked like they practiced authority in front of mirrors. One of them said, with a smile that tried for casual menace, "We can make you leave." Tommy stepped forward slowly. "You're welcome to try," he said, voice even, palms open, a posture that says we're not looking for a scrap, but we're not backing down either. I remember the hush, the way even a lawnmower seemed to wait. June slipped back inside, hands steady like an old habit, and found a stack of photocopies with marginal notes, amendments that had been retrofitted around dates. That's the smell. Fraud always leaves the same chemical tang. We made digital copies, signed witness statements on our phones, labeled photos, and called the county clerk because facts get more power when they're official. When deputies arrived, the mood shifted from confrontation to documentation. Margot tried a different tone: wounded patriot, protector of the neighborhood, but the ledger and the photocopies contradicted her narratives. The deputy asked calm questions and flipped the ledger open like it was a book of bad intentions. The men who tried to intimidate us looked smaller when asked for ID. Margot went from cool to flustered quicker than you can watch a rehearsed performance fold. The arrest felt anticlimactic and perfect at once. There was no triumphant music, just the dull click of cuffs and a crowd's exhale. Some neighbors came out on porches and watched like an audience that hadn't been invited but couldn't look away. One elderly woman I barely knew cried quietly and said, "Good. That's the thing, what starts as a personal fight ripples into a community. For some, it forces reckonings they didn't expect to have." After the deputies left with boxes, the work began. There were lawyers, not the cinematic kind, but the practical ones who showed up with forms and patience. There were hearings and restitution plans, and a messy, required auditing of the HOA records. The renters got their deposit back. Margot was charged. The HOA board had to hold open meetings and put minutes on a public site. It was boring at times, but boring is the language of repair. I want to be honest about the feeling that sat heavy on me for weeks. It wasn't triumph. It was exhaustion, like the kind you have after a long watch where nothing goes wrong or right. You just survive. I found myself waking at 3 in the morning, thinking about signatures and how easy it is to let small systems slide until they become mechanisms for profit. I also thought about my father, a man who taught me to fix a fence and to notice when a neighbor stopped waving, and felt grateful that I could call friends who'd answer. There was one scene I still replay: Margot and I on her manicured walkway as the late sun angled off those perfectly trimmed hedges. She said, soft and practiced, "We did what's best for the community." I set my deed on the truck hood and tapped it like a judge's gavel. Community doesn't mean you monetize trust, I said. Her smile flickered, the kind of smile that was meant to close a conversation, not hold one. That flicker told me more than her folder did. People ask if I wanted revenge. I didn't. I wanted accountability. The renters who'd shown up with folded cash and hopeful eyes were embarrassed, sure, but they were also relieved. They didn't want spectacle, they wanted their lives back. That made what we did less about triumph and more about repair. Small things mattered: returning a deposit, returning a key, making sure the HOA published minutes so the next Margot wouldn't find a dark corner to hide paperwork in. After the unrest, neighbors started showing up in ways I hadn't seen before. An elderly man who'd never spoken now brought old receipts from past dues. A teacher ran for the board and promised transparency. Neighbors rode bikes in a way that felt like reclaiming public space. It's not a neat ending, it's a slow one. But sometimes slow is durable. There were smaller closure scenes: a neighbor handing me a box of old records she found in her garage that filled gaps in the HOA's history. A young woman at the hearing who testified that Margot's group had pressured her brother into signing something just to keep peace. Those tiny testimonies stacked like bricks until they became an indictment. I don't claim to be a crusader. I am a guy who saw his house being claimed and kept his head long enough to follow paper to paper until the story made sense. If there's a takeaway, it's this: small powers, left unchecked, can do real harm. The tools to stop them are boring photocopies, witness statements, official records, but they're effective. So what would you do? Rush in and shout, or methodically gather proof and call it in? Do HOAs hold too much sway without enough scrutiny, or are they simply volunteers we forget to watch? Put your thoughts below. Tell the story you'd tell your neighbor. If this pushed a button, share it with someone who lives in a community association, and subscribe if you want more real stories about small fights that matter. Let's talk about what justice looks like when it isn't a showdown, when it's paperwork, patience, and a few friends who show up when you need them.